Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to another Inside Edition of Voice of Victory Lane with Kip Thompson. We're having a great week, getting ready for some races in our area this weekend. Lakeview Motor Speedway is running. There are going to be asphalt races going on at the Florence Motor Speedway, and also County Line Raceway has some races going on as well. Fayetteville Motor Speedway is down for the month of August, and maybe you can find time to go out and support a local racetrack in your area if you would. I know that'd be much appreciated by other track promoters. Before we get started with tonight's show, we want to give a big thank you to our show sponsor, Raging Rooster Catering, Tony and Bobby Jackson out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. Raging Rooster Catering, they cater to groups of 25 or more. You can look them up on Facebook, Raging Rooster Catering. You can find their email address, their contact phone number, and just give those guys a call. They do any type of event that you would like and have a great menu. So be sure to check them out. And also, if you do a lot of cooking like I do, Rooster's All-Purpose Seasoning is probably some of the best stuff I've ever used. And it's available at Fayetteville Motor Speedway when the Raging Rooster is parked on the main concourse. And you want to make sure that you check that stuff out, because I do a lot of cooking. And I tell you, it's kind of taking my cooking to another level. All right, so let me set the stage for tonight's show for everybody. What we do on this show, we normally go in and talk to drivers, teams, track promoters, series directors, and just talk about racing in general. And it's mostly, like I said, geared toward teams and drivers. But there are so many people that come to a racetrack for there at one time before I got into announcing and PR work and stuff like that. I was guilty of doing the same thing. You would go to a racetrack, and when you get to the racetrack, you know, cars just show up on the track, and you kind of think, hey, that's what you expect when you go to the racetrack. There are a lot of people who are behind the scenes that you really don't know what it takes to put on a race and what's all involved until you've been around it a little bit like I have. And tonight, I'm very happy to have a good friend of mine who's been around numerous racetracks for years. He started out as a flagman, and now has worked his way up into a race director's position. He's no stranger to a lot of the people who are watching our show tonight, and want to welcome to our show race director at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway, my good friend Charlie Camp. So Charlie, glad to have you, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, let's talk about, as I just said, you've been involved in many racetracks in the past. You started out in the flag stand, got into race directing, and kind of moved all over the place. And really, on any given Saturday, I've seen you, man. You wear many hats. So let's kind of talk about how you got started and what you do at a racetrack.
Well, from the very beginning, let me just say I grew up at Fayetteville Motor Speedway. My mother was one of the first scorekeepers there whenever they opened up the track. She would work for and was good friends with a lot of the people that originally opened up the track. So at that time I was 4 and 5 years old, and I kind of grew up as it went through its asphalt phase. And then when they tore the track up, its dirt phase. So I pretty much grew up at that racetrack. So I've seen it go through all of its changes. And I've been glad to be a part of it for the last few years. Like I said, started in the flag stand. Larry Norris and Jim Long put me in the flag stand whenever they lost their flagman. I stayed up there a number of years, and then I was moved up into the tower to kind of facilitate race directing. And that's where I've been ever since. And I've done it at Fayetteville Motor Speedway. I've done it at a number of tracks where, when they needed a race director to stand in for somebody, I've traveled to those tracks and done it there also.
Well, I know on any given Saturday, there's just so much more than just being, quote unquote, the flagman. There's so much more to being just the race director and calling the race and telling, caution on the speedway to the drivers. Because I've announced races, I've stood right beside you, and it's a very, very important job and a very hectic job as to what you do. Let's just talk about all the different things that you do at a racetrack, whether it be from, making sure they're in the staging lanes, the next group is ready to go, when you have cautions and stuff like that.
Sure. So typical race day, we get to the track early. My scorekeepers are normally there at noon to start getting prepped for drivers to come in and register. So I kind of check in with them to make sure things are going smoothly as far as driver registration. I know my race pass has eased up a lot of that tension on race day, where they can pre-register and get in. So the scorekeepers kind of have a rhythm now that when the drivers show up at the window, they can pretty much check them off that they're there. If they've already pre-registered, they rent out the transponders and all that. During that time from between the time registration opens until the actual drivers meeting, most of the time I'm mingling around the track trying to give a hand where it's needed. I mingle with the drivers a little bit to make sure they are getting to the registration window and making sure that they're going to show up at the drivers meeting. That's usually kind of the platform the drivers use to voice some concerns about something that needs to be watched out during the race or during qualifying or something along those lines. So also with that, our announcers, you and Bill, I make sure that you guys are set up and going and don't have any issues. If you do have any issues, I try to help out or try to bring some resources to bear on that if there's. So most of the time to start out with, it's kind of coordinating everything and getting everybody ready for that, the event to happen after we have the drivers meeting. Once, it's time for the drivers meeting, sometimes that's like corralling cats, trying to get all the drivers to the meeting. Some of the information that's put out at the drivers meeting is very repetitious, but there are other times that we put out information concerning track conditions, concerning a special program we're going to run that night, how we're going to do heat races. So we want all the drivers to attend those meetings. I run that meeting from start to beginning. Dave will add a couple of things if he deems necessary. He'll show up at the meeting and add his 2 cents worth in. But then we put that information out, and we also put out the schedule of events for the evening and how it's happening. Once the drivers meeting is broken up, usually that first class that is supposed to be in the chute, we try to go ahead and get them rounded up and get in the chute. I'm transitioning from the pit area up to the tower. Again, I check in with my scorekeepers and the announcer to make sure we're ready to go. I put on a headset, and I have a headset on from the time we put the first car on the track until the time the last car leaves the track. So I check in with my track personnel, my track prep personnel, the emergency crews, all that. I make sure everybody's on the radio, make sure everything is working with that before we even roll the first car out. Once all that's coordinated and we're ready to go to start hot laps and qualifying and all, then I start directing drivers to come out on the racetrack. I fill them in on their receiver as to what we're doing, how we're doing it, if we're doing hot laps together with qualifying or if we're doing separate, and any other information that they need to know that wasn't put out at the drivers meeting. I'm in their ear from the time they roll out on the track till the time they leave.
Well, as many of you race fans that are watching the show tonight, as you've just heard from Charlie Council, he is the race director at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway. As you can tell, there is so much that goes on into putting on a race. It's just more than people just gathering and getting inside the grandstands and hanging around in the pit area with your favorite driver or whatever. There's a lot of work that goes on to make a show happen, not only at Fayetteville Motor Speedway, but there is a Charlie Council at every racetrack across this country, and it is quite a job. And Charlie does a fabulous job. And there's a couple of things that I want to get into in a little bit more depth, but we're going to take a real quick break, and we're going to hear from our sponsor right here on Victory Lane with Kip Thompson.
Tonight's show is being sponsored by Raging Rooster Catering out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. We cater any event, big or small, weddings, holiday events, and festivals. Call us today, 910-237-4565. Follow us on Facebook at Raging Rooster Catering. We invite you to come get you some.
Okay, fans, welcome back. You are inside another edition of Voice of Victory Lane with Kip Thompson. And tonight our special guest is race director at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway, Charlie Council. And Charlie, one of the couple of things that I wanted to get into that really kind of puts you in the bullseye sometimes whenever somebody gets two things in particular. One, when a caution is called, the caution is on such and such car, somebody has to go to the rear, somebody doesn't like it. But tell me what goes into, and tell our viewers what goes into that process as to the correct call to make.
So there are several factors. Of course, the rules, we have a set of rules for racing procedures that happen on a racetrack. So if you do any of those infractions, you're going to be called out for it. But in the instance of a caution, what happens is, typically a caution will come out if a car spins or something happens on the track that's going to endanger the drivers or anybody associated, around the track and all that. So we'll throw the caution, get everybody slowed down. In the event somebody has spun out, usually we'll throw the caution if the car is facing oncoming traffic or the driver's door is exposed. In the case of some of the legends, a lot of times they'll spin out and then they're right back in the gas and go because they're small wheelbase they can do. And I'll be the first to admit I'm human. The racetrack's big. I'm in the tower. I have a team that works with me with the scorekeepers, the announcer. There's usually a couple of other people that are up there that help me watch, but I can't see everything. So a lot of times I take input from the track staff that's scattered throughout the track, and they have been told when racing is going on, you need to be watching the racetrack. So that's Jim the Jeep Man, that's Frankie at the scales, that's our record drivers, all the people that are scattered throughout the racetrack. They are watching the race so that if I need to call on them for input, which most of the time I do, and Dave's usually down there too, and he'll put his 2 cents worth in if he actually has a radio as to what he saw. So I take all those factors in, and if I saw it, then that's what I make the call. A lot of times I know the drivers and their teams are down at the track level and they really can't see what transpired. They have in their mind, because it's their team, that it's always going to be, somebody else's fault, with lack of a better term. But there's a lot of factors that go in there watching. If I see a driver that has been consistently doing the same line for 4 laps, and then all of a sudden he goes deeper into the turn and slams into somebody and causes them to spin out, then that's going to be called on him. If somebody sticks the bumper to somebody, those types of calls usually we can call pretty quickly. Some of them are questionable, but a call has to be made. If a car stops on the track, he has to go to the rear if he's the one that brought the caution out. So there are many factors we take into consideration before I actually make a call.
Well, I will. Let's go back and let's touch on one thing. I will say in defense for you, when you say, hey, I'll admit I'm human and I can't see everything. I know what that's like because I've stood right beside you. I've stood right beside other race directors. If I announced a race at Lakeview, I announced a race at Fayetteville, I announced a race at County Line, Halifax, wherever it may be. It's a hard thing to keep your eyes on every car on the track because your natural instinct, or it is for me, and you may tell me it's not for you, but I don't do your job. It's kind of hard not to keep your eyes on the leaders, and everything that's going on up front because there's so much action right there. And watching mid-pack toward the back, it's very easy to get caught up. Or if you got the leaders out in front and there's somebody 5th, 6th, 7th place that's really racing for position, it's hard to not key in on one thing because you're seeing if somebody here takes somebody out because you got to make a call, but there's so much stuff going on elsewhere. I mean, it is quite a job. I know because I've been there to see you do it, and I know it's tough.
It is, and one of the benefits for me as a race director now is I spend a lot of time in the flag stand. So I had gotten into the habit of watching the whole track instead of trying to focus in on. Now, you get to know your drivers, you get to know their driving style, you get to know how they react in certain situations. So if there are cars that are fighting, jockeying for position, like if you got 3 or 4, I'll give the case in point of the legend drivers. We got 30 cars out there on the racetrack. If there are several of those jockeying for position and all that, then I may focus in on that area. But my team that's in the tower and my track staff know, watch the rest of the field. Usually Katrina and Mandy, they'll say, I got the middle pack. I got the backpack, while I'm concentrating on the ones that are up front. And typically the way I scan the racetrack, if something is about to happen, like a car gets out of shape and all that, you pick up on that from our vantage point. Things are out of sorts, so to speak, and you immediately turn to focus on that to see what happened. And you can see if they spun out on their own, or if somebody still has a bumper stuck to them, or something like that. They have a flat tire. A lot of times, if it's on turn 2 on the back straightaway and all that, we really don't know that's flat tire until they actually roll around to the front straightaway to see that the tire is actually flat. But they know part of the process is they need to stop on the racetrack if they have a flat tire. So watching the track, I scan that track constantly. My head's constantly turning, and then I'll focus on areas where, there are people that are bunched up together, where they're starting to, jockey for positions, so that if something happens, I can make a fair call.
Well, I will say, and all of that, yes, what a hard job that is, and it's great to know that all those other people, they get the recognition for being part of, with Mandy, Katrina, and even Bill. I mean, I know he's in there helping you too. He may be watching part of the pack, because sometimes when the cars are up wide open throttle, you can't hear Bill over the sound system anyway. So I know he's there to aid you in what's going on the track. But going back, not only just, calling the races and the cautions and the ruling and the call that you make, going back earlier in the show, you talked about the drivers meeting and making sure people know what they got to have as far as their lineup, when they're coming out, and this, that, and the other. Also, I know that you also do another thing there that you didn't mention. It's a really big thing, and it's very important to you because I've seen you call people out before, making sure that every race car has the safety equipment that they need in order to get onto the racetrack.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we instituted whenever Dave took over the racetrack was, requiring drivers to wear gloves. We've got some of the old school drivers that, don't feel like they can drive as well with gloves on. But we've all seen, just like I say in the drivers meeting, we've all seen the YouTube videos where drivers have gotten trapped in a car that's on fire. And the first time he reaches out and grabs a hot piece of metal, he's done helping himself get out of the car. He's going to rely on the track staff and emergency crews to get him out of that car. So we stress safety for the driver's benefit, because one thing we don't want to happen is a family to be totally devastated with something that happens, and it could have been avoided with safety equipment, seatbelts, the driver's suit, the roll cage. I've seen some roll cages in some of the entry classes and all that where they come in and they were bolted to the floor and not welded in. I've seen them where they stuck it in and only 4 points were, welded in the car instead of all the points that needed to be welded in. So, sometimes the teams and stuff will kind of push safety to a side when they're trying to gain that speed or gain that advantage. But that needs to be the number one priority. And we kind of stress that in a driver's meeting to make sure that you've got those bases covered, because this is a benefit to you as a driver or as a team member, to make sure that driver stays safe.
Well, thank you so much for elaborating on that and to give that reassurance for the fans and the drivers and the teams as to what you guys do, the measures that you take, the protocol that you have for safety, because I've been around it a long time, just like you have, but you can see something that gets really, really scary in just the blink of an eye. So safety is a very, very high standard at all racetracks, but I know for sure at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway. And just listening and talking with you tonight, viewers, you see right here firsthand with Charlie Council, race director, Fayetteville Motor Speedway, and really all the information that Charlie has voiced here tonight really does not scratch the surface as to other aspects of things that go onto a racetrack, as to what happens from the time that gate opens, when the first car drives through the gate, everything that happens until the last car leaves and that gate is closed. So a lot of stuff there. Great information by Charlie Council to just give a kind of a description of what a race director does and how many people it takes to help him with people that need help, what he does to help them. So it's a whole team effort. And it's just they got a great system at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway, no doubt, and probably some of the best people in place when a show's going on. All right, the next thing that I want to hit on real quick before we close, Charlie, I know this is another thing that you're very, very heavily involved in, and I've seen this firsthand in our last two races, being with you like before the race, during the race, after the race. It's always I know it's Dave Mitchell's call because he is the track promoter. He has the final say. When we have weather, when we have rain, when we wait it out, you call it early, everybody complains. Man, he called it too early. Well, then he didn't call it, and people get here. Well, he should have called it because he knew it was raining. Well, or knew the rain was coming. Talk about weather, how that plays a factor in when we can and when we can't race, because I saw firsthand this weekend, everybody stands around and everybody's got an iPhone and they're looking at their weather radar or they're looking at a weather app. Well, you guys, and I know you in particular, because you showed it to me this weekend, you have like the same app or whatever it is, you're in conjunction with the Fayetteville airport. And so with their meteorology staff, that's probably the most high-tech, most up-to-date weather reading for our area. Talk a little bit about how that works and how hard it is to, well, maybe we shouldn't wait it out. Maybe we should wait it out. Talk about, what it takes to make that kind of call as well.
Yeah. So, and I knew you were going to call me on the carpet about this race this last weekend because that one kind of blew up all of a sudden. But whenever I was in the Navy, part of my job description was dealing with the weather as an operations specialist. So I've kind of kept that going. That's kind of been a amateur hobby of mine, is keeping up with the weather and what's going on. And it kind of works well with the racetrack. So I got several tools that are available to me that I subscribe to that, others could subscribe to, but they're kind of expensive. And I use it in my day-to-day activities working the job that I do now. So, but I do be in contact with some of the folks at the airport to kind of keep an idea of what's going on weather-wise and what they're expecting. It's kind of like my own meteorologist in my pocket, so to speak, but also I've learned to read the radar pretty well. And this particular past weekend, you can't get it 100%. This particular weekend, we were watching the race, or watching the radar for the race. Everything looked good on the radar. It looked like stuff was going to pass over us. In fact, Wayne and Freddie got prepared to start rolling the track in. And just as soon as I made the transition from the inner pits up top, I get a phone call and said, "Are you ready for this cell that's getting ready to open up?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? There wasn't anything on the radar, 15, 20 minutes ago." And that's how quick it changed. We had a cell that opened up and developed right above the racetrack airport area. And it dumped 2.25 inches on the racetrack in 45 minutes. That's something I couldn't foresee, or any weather person could foresee. It happened, and we were already there at the racetrack. It was unfortunate we lost the racetrack with that much water being dumped at one time. But yeah, on race days and usually the days leading up to that, even on the practice nights, I watch the weather to see if, it's going to be a factor with us. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And we try to make the call for traveling series that may be coming into the racetrack, because it's disheartening if you drive 4 hours to come to our racetrack, and we didn't call it and we were expecting 60, 70, 80% chance of rain, then that's kind of disheartening, to make that commitment to our track, and not give you enough time to make a decision. So we try to watch that very closely. But yes, I'm pretty much involved in that, and I'm like any other weatherman. I sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong.
Well, let me go back then. Let me redirect, kind of how I asked that question, because I guess I wasn't really kind of like calling you out under the rug on that, because the deal with that is because I was with you right beside, and you showed me the radar. You were like, "Hey, I think everything's good because here's a band of showers. Here's the front. Everything is south of us and moving east." And then like you said, just out of nowhere, because you kind of gave Wayne and Freddie the okay. Hey, go ahead and start open up the racetrack. I think we're good. And then right after that, just as you mentioned, you got that call, and that sale comes out of nowhere. I've also seen the flip side of that, because I've sat in the pit area for many, many, many years and looked on my own radar on my phone and thinking, how in the world are we just not just getting blasted and drowned, green, red all over where we're sitting right at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway, and never get a drop? So that's a funny thing, but people need to realize that the racetrack and the staff do a phenomenal job, because, as Charlie said, for you to drive 3 or 4 hours to come to Fayetteville, we would like to give the courtesy to the drivers. Hey, if we think we can't get this, in, we want to give you enough notice to where you can go and maybe race somewhere else or whatever. But that it's a hard call, just like being in the tower.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is.
Well, I tell you what, Charlie, man, I really appreciate you taking time this evening to be on our show. It just gives everybody another a more in-depth look of what it takes to make race day happen at any racetrack. And tonight, we're pleased to have as our guest our very own track big guy. He's the director. He wears many hats, but does a phenomenal job. Charlie Council, race director at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway. Charlie, thank you so much, man, for joining us. And I hope to see you at a racetrack pretty soon. Be a little while before we get back to Fayetteville, but I'm already itching to get back.
I hear you. I am too. So I appreciate you having me on.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching tonight. For Charlie Council, I'm Kip Thompson, voice of Victory Lane. I also want to give a big shout out to our sponsors as we close tonight's show. Raging Rooster Catering, Tony and Bobby Jackson out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. Those guys do an awesome job with their catering business. They're all over the state of North Carolina. Be sure to go to Facebook and look at their page, Raging Rooster Catering. You can find their phone number. You can contact them by email, and they can give you all the details of what they offer and what they can do for an event just for you. Also, always remember, Roosters all-purpose seasoning. That's some of the best stuff there is on the planet as far as I'm concerned. Make sure if you're around the Raging Rooster Catering trailer on the main concourse of Fayetteville Motor Speedway, you can pick it up there, or you visit me down in the pits. I have some in my truck, and I promise you it will not disappoint you. Be sure to go to YouTube, Voice of Victory Lane, like, share, and subscribe our page. Also, be sure to go to Voice of Victory Lane on Facebook and like and share our page as well. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And as always, be on the lookout. I could be coming to a racetrack near you, and you could be who we're talking about next on an upcoming show. Have a great week. Get out somewhere this weekend and support a local racetrack, and hope everybody has a great remainder part of the week and a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Good night, everybody.